If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
Welcome back to another episode of the Lendr podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bryce Matheson. And today we have Mr. Jay Conner. And we were chatting just a little bit before the episode, and I am absolutely stoked to pick your brain because I can already tell you're a wealth of information. And selfishly, you know, we're always looking to raise more capital for our own lending company and lending business. And obviously, the more you lend, the more you make, right? So as a smaller hard money private lender, just to kind of give you a little bit of a context, we're currently sitting around 3 million right now, so definitely on the smaller end. But we've networked and talked with a lot of people in the space who have $40-50 million real estate funds, and they've they said it didn't take that long to get there. So I know it starts slow and then just kind of compounds and grows over time. So anyway, all that being said, I know you've given me a little bit of an introduction, but for our listeners, go ahead and give them a little bit of background and tell them about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, Bryce, thank you so much for inviting me to come along on your show and talk about what I'm most passionate about. And of course, that's private money and private lending, because that's had more of an impact on mine and my wife, Carol Joy's real estate investing business than anything else. So we live in a very, very small town here in eastern North Carolina, Morehead City, North Carolina. Our total population market that we target is only 40,000 people. Wow. As far as our single family investing company. We started that in 2003. And we don't do a lot of deals. We do 2 to 3 real estate flips a month. But average profits now are $86,000 per deal. And I don't say that from a point of ego at all. I just make the point that there's an argument to be made you can make a lot of money in a small market, and I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond and dominate the market. So that's what we do through a lot of Google ads and that type of thing. So where in the world did this world of private money come from? Well, from 2003 when we started until 2009, January of 2009 to be specific, we relied on the local bank. That's actually the only institutional money that I knew existed. I'd never heard of hard money lending. I for sure had never heard of private money. The only thing I knew to do, Bryce, there for those first 6 years is go to the local bank and apply for a mortgage. I had a line of credit and, pull up my skirt so the banker can see all my personal assets and pull my credit report and, show all the financial statements and et cetera. And that's all I knew to do.
Right.
And Bryce, that worked okay from 2003 until January of 2009. In January of 2009, I had 2 houses under contract to purchase. And so I did what I had done many, many times for 6 years. I picked up the phone. By the way, hard to believe, we actually still have handsets here in North Carolina with cords attached
with the cord and everything. I love it.
But I called up my banker. His name was Steve. I called him up. We had our pleasantries, and I told him about these 2 deals that represented over $100,000 in potential profit that I wanted him to fund. Well, I learned like that over the telephone that my line of credit had been closed with no notice to me. And I said, Steve, what in the world are you talking about? My line of credit is closed. I got a 6-year history with the bank. Payments are always on time. And we've had a great relationship. And Steve said, well, Jay, don't you know there's a global financial crisis going on right now? I said, no, I don't know anything about no global financial crisis, but you just gave me a financial crisis because now I don't have a way to fund these 2 deals. So I hung up the phone. And Bryce, I'm going to share with you a very, very important question, the powers in questions. I asked myself a question. that led me to learning all about private money. And the question that I asked myself was this, quote unquote. I said, Jay, talking to myself, I said, Jay, who do you know that can help you with your problem? And by the way, these people running around saying every problem's an opportunity, I want to throw up. I didn't have an opportunity. I had a problem. I had a problem. I didn't have a way to fund my deals, and they're under contract. Now, transparently, that problem became a huge opportunity, right?
Sure.
But at that moment in time, it's a problem, right? So I asked myself that question. Who do I know that can help me with my problem? Well, I immediately thought of Jeff Blankenship, good friend of ours. He was living in Greensboro, North Carolina at the time in January 2009, and he was investing in single-family houses. So I called up Jeff, picked up this very telephone, and I told him what had just happened in my problem. And Jeff said, well, Jay, welcome to the club. I said, what club is that? He said, that's the club of having your line of credit closed at the bank. They just closed my line of credit last week. I said, well, Jeff, how are you going to fund your real estate deals if you can't borrow from the bank? He said, well, have you ever heard of private money and private lenders? I said, no, I don't have a clue what that is. He says, have you heard of self-directed IRA companies where an individual can take retirement funds that they currently have, transfer it with no tax penalties or tax effect to a self-directed IRA company, and then they can lend that money out and get unlimited tax returns, either tax-free or tax-deferred. I said, Jeff, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. But I knew Jeff had told me something. He gave me an introductory course over the telephone. But Bryce, I studied private money and how to go about raising private money from individuals, just like you and me, without ever asking for money. So I hung up the phone from my friend Jeff Blankenship. I studied private money, and I knew the first thing that I had to do was and people ask me this all the time. They say, Jay, what's the best way to start raising private money? And I said, well, the very first thing you got to do is you got to own the real estate between your ears before you start trying to own some traditional real estate. And what I'm talking about is the mindset. So the traditional way that people, real estate investors, go about trying to raise private money is they beg, they chase, they try to sell, they try to persuade. And, desperation's got a smell to it. The worst time in the world to try to be raising private money for real estate deals is when you need it.
Sure.
For
That's
a deal. Point.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I got my mindset right. And so the mindset that in other words, the hat that I put on is I said, I want to have the mindset of being a private money teacher. I want to teach individuals in my own network, people I go to church with, people in the Rotary Club, people in Business Networking International, people in my own network. I want to teach them what private money and private lending is and show them my program that I've put together. In other words, the interest rate that I'll pay, the maximum loan to value compared to the after repaired value of a property, how they can get their money back in case of an emergency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The length of the notes without having any real estate attached to it. You see, I knew instinctively if I tried to teach somebody and share an opportunity with them and have a deal attached to it for them to fund, I'm already sounding desperate without even trying to sound desperate. So I separated the conversations. This is how I've never asked anybody for money. Never ask anybody for money. They say, Jay, well, how do you have $8.5 million that you just rotate from projects to projects to projects to projects, and you never ask anybody for money? Well, here's the secret. We separate the conversations, two separate conversations between teaching the program, right? Just teaching and sharing the opportunity of what that looks like to be a private lender, and then coming back and having a deal for them to fund. There's all kinds of ways to share the information. I've I've held private lender luncheons, so I'll invite 20 people or so. I've raised $969,000 at just one private lender luncheon where I've got my CPA and my attorney and my realtor and my team there. And I'll have, 20 potential lenders there. And I just pull out my PowerPoint. I feed them lunch. I'll tell you the story if we have time about how I got my very first private lender. That's a pretty interesting story. But, we separate those conversations. And so then when I've got a piece of real estate under contract that I'm ready to have funded, I then just call up one of my private lenders and I give them, Bryce, what's called the good news phone call. Well, what in the world is the good news phone call? I call them up. I say, I got great news. In fact, I want to share with your audience and you right now, Bryce, the exact script as to how I get my single family deals funded without ever asking for money. So they've already told me how much they got. They told me they like the program, and I told them I'll put your money to work for you just as soon as possible. So, Bryce, let's say you're one of my private lenders, and let's say you've told me you got $150,000, and you've got it sitting over there in retirement funds, and I've introduced you to a self-directed IRA company that I recommend, and you've moved that money over. You're waiting for me to put your money to work.
Right.
You're relying on me to put your money to work because you moved the money over there, right? Because you like the program. So I call you up, Bryce, with the good news phone call, and I say, Bryce, I've got great news for you. I can now put your money to work. I've got a house under contract with an after repaired value of $200,000 over here in Newport. The funding required for that house, for that deal, is $150,000, which matches up to your money you tell me you've got. I'm not exceeding the 75% after repaired value, maximum loan to value that I told you about. Funding's going to be next Friday, so you'll need to have your funds wired to my real estate attorney's trust account by next Thursday. I'm going to have my real estate attorney email you the wiring instructions. That's the end of the conversation. The most stupid thing I could do is ask you if you want to fund the deal. Of course you want to fund the deal. You've been waiting for the good news phone call that I can now put your money to work. So unpacking what's going on there is no chasing, no begging, no selling, sharing the program, the opportunity without any particular real estate attached to it. They love the program. They say, yes, I'm ready to go. I said, I'll let you know when I got a deal. I give you the good news phone call. The deal gets funded, and here we go. One big mistake that people make when they're first raising capital is they talk too much. They talk too much. They try to talk somebody into doing something. Well, here's the thing. People say I have a fear of rejection. Well, here's my question. How can you be rejected if you're not asking anybody for anything? Right?
That's true.
You're sharing the program. Here's an opportunity. You like it, you don't like it, whatever. If you do like it, I'll put your money to work for you as soon as possible. And of course, I'm not going to bring a deal for them to fund unless it matches the criteria of the program. So I'll turn it back to you, Bryce. That's sort of an overview.
That's great.
How this all started.
Yeah, that leads into a bunch of different questions I've got for you. So how do you handle the conversation in between, so they've made this transition to move their money over to a self-directed IRA. They're using a third-party custodian. Yeah. How do you handle the conversation?
Or they could just be using liquid capital. I've got 47 I got 47 private lenders. Not one of them had ever heard of private money till I told them about it. Some of them are using just liquid investment capital. Some of them are using retirement funds. Some are using both. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
No.
Anyway,
you're good. My question is, how do you handle the conversation between the time when you have an investor who's interested but you don't have a deal lined up yet? Do you say, hey, it'll be 2 to 3 weeks, or because there's that anticipation piece, right? People want to get their money right to work, and like you said, you have the good news phone call. But what do you do in between?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. First thing I do is I put them to the top of the list. When they're new, right?
That's smart.
When they're new. I want to prove to them that I can perform and I can actually put their money to work. So, there is a juggling act. It's been a juggling act, right? if you're a hard money lender, it's a juggling act.
Yep. And that never goes away from my understanding.
Between having enough money, having deals to fund, putting your investors' money to work. Yeah, it's always a juggling act. But a couple of tips. So I have what's called the queue. So like when I pay off a private lender, I'll tell them I'm going to put them back in the queue. And as they move up the line and we do other deals with the other private lenders that are ahead of them, we'll put their money back to work. So I actually have an exercise at my live events, which is called the Private Money Conference. At my live events, I actually have the attendees go through an exercise that shows them in their own market exactly how much private money they need to raise within the next 12 months to do their deals, right? I mean, I can teach you how to raise a lot of private money, but you sort of need to have a pretty good idea. Well, really, how much do I need?
Sure.
And not have too much, but have enough, right? So one tip is if they're brand new, I'm moving to the top of the list. If I can't put their money to work within 30 days here in my small market, I have been known to take the new private lender's money and pay off an existing private lender's note and use private money in that case to do a refinance.
Right.
So that I can, prove to the new private lender. So, for example, I have not actively raised any new private money in probably over 7 years. Because I just keep using what I got. Right. I keep using what I got. And plus, I still get referrals all the time from existing private lenders. For goodness sakes, I got a new private lender coming on board next month. He's got over $500,000 that he just retired sitting in his retirement account. Well, that, comes from a referral. So long answer to your question. What do you say to them? Well, I manage expectations, right? And communication, of course, is key. I tell them typically I'll be able to put your money to work within 30 days or so. Maybe it's going to be 45 days or whatever. But the key is don't let that length of time go by without, keeping them informed as to where you are on being able to put their money to work. Now, once you put their money to work, their most favorite form of communication is receiving checks in the mail.
Right.
So, I pretty much don't have to do any other communication with my private lenders other than making sure the money shows up. Some of my private lenders get paid monthly, some get paid quarterly, some get paid semi-annually, depending on their needs. But communication and managing expectations is very important.
I love it. Do you ever like commingle multiple investors on a single deal, or is it just one investor for one particular deal?
That's a great question. So all the deals that we do, now, of course, in this context of private money that I'm talking about, I'm not doing deals with multifamily projects. Now, it's all the same money, right? It's the same, and it's the same individuals that are lending their money out or investing their money, in deals. But I'm not doing what's called syndication, or I haven't created a fund for the private lenders to invest in. All the single family houses that we do are what's called one-offs. Sure. And I'm sure you know what that means, Bryce, but for the sake of your audience, when I say a one-off, that means we've got a single family house. Now that could be a duplex, triplex, or quadplex, but we got one house, if you will, sitting there. And then we may have one or maybe two private lenders that are funding that deal. This is why the SEC does not regulate these one-offs that I'm talking about, because you got a private lender, perhaps a couple of private lenders that are funding that one deal, and each of them are getting their own promissory note and their own deed of trust. Most of people call it a mortgage. Here in North Carolina,
Depends
Texas,
where you live.
a few other states, deed of trust. And of course, that's the document that collateralizes the note and gives the lender the legal right to foreclose. Anybody that's in a second position, I'm going to pay a little bit more interest to, because that's a higher risk position. The only way they can be made whole if they had to foreclose is they're going to inherit the private lender note that's ahead of them.
Sure.
Right. And that's how we also use what's called total loan to value. And what I mean by total loan to value is adding up all the private lender notes that are loaning money on a deal and making sure all those notes do not exceed 75% of the after repaired value on that single family house.
I love it. I love it. Wow. Are you comfortable sharing the different rates and terms that you give to your investors?
Sure. I've been paying them the same thing since 2009. People save me they say, Jay, wait a minute. With all the market fluctuation and the interest rates going up crazy the last few years, how are you paying your lenders the same rate that you did in 2009? Well, so here's the rates, and then I'll tell you why I've been paying the same thing. It felt multiple reasons. So any private lender in first position, I pay 8% interest only, and that's simple interest, not compounded, and that's an annual percentage rate.
Sure.
So if I'm using the money for 6 months, then they're actually getting a 4% annual percentage rate, right? That's not an 8% on the deal per se.
Right. Annualized. Yep.
Annualized. And if they're in a secondary position or junior position, I'm paying 10%, right? So how is it I've been able to pay the same thing all these years and still do today? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, remember the big difference. When you're doing private money the way I do it and you're putting on your teacher hat, you're teaching the program. You know, of our 47 private lenders, not one of them had ever heard of private money. None of them had ever heard of private money until I put on my teacher hat and I told them about it. None of them had ever heard of self-directed IRAs and how they could lend money from, using that vehicle. So one reason is because it's my program, I teach it, and I make the rules. You see, that's one thing I had to get straight in my head. Because 99% of the time when anybody's borrowing money, who's making the rules? The lender.
Yep.
99% of the time, the lender's making the rules. There's some saying out there that's been around forever, he who has the cash makes the rules, or cash rules, or whatever. Well, it don't have to be that way, right? The lender don't have to be that way. Now, but here's the big difference. Here's the big difference. Like when I say I make the rules, I just say I created the program, right? And anybody, I teach it all the time at my live events. Anybody can just duplicate my program and I'll give them a teacher hat. Sure. And they can start sharing, the program with other people. But you see, here's one part that makes that work. You see, if you're talking with an existing private lender, like an individual that's, got, interestingly enough, 70% of account holders at self-directed IRA companies want to lend real estate investors money. They want to just be passive, right? They don't want to negotiate deals. They don't want to find deals. They don't want to oversee renovations. They just want to get high rates of return safely and securely.
Sure.
Well, those people that are already lending out, guess what? I'm not putting on my teacher hat.
Mm-hmm.
They already
understand it. Yeah, they get it.
They already know what private money is. So now, instead of putting on my teacher hat, now that's a negotiation conversation. Well, I'd much rather teach and make the offer than negotiating.
Sure.
With, and of course, if it's an institutional lender, there is no negotiation.
Right. You don't get a say.
There is no negotiation. Well, guess what? When I'm making the rules as the borrower, you see how this is a 180-degree mind shift.
Yep, right? Absolutely.
So when I'm making the rules as the borrower and I'm my own underwriter, there's no applications. Guess what? When you borrow money like this, you're already approved. You're already approved.
It's a beautiful thing. I love it.
You're already approved. There's no application. You are your own underwriter.
Yep.
And you're making, an opportunity available to people that didn't know that there's wow, this kind of way to get these kinds of rates and returns. Now, here's another reason I still pay 8 to 10%. You can go down to First Citizens Bank right now. Now, a year ago, it was 5%. Right now, and that was a year for a CD.
Sure.
And that was like a 9-month CD. Right now, it's hanging around 4%. Right. And in my opinion, it's going to continue to come down over time.
Agreed.
But nonetheless, 8% and 10% is still a whole lot better than 4% and 5%.
Yep. It's literally double. Yeah. And people love that. Well, and the other thing too, that I was going to say that I love about your model is, you have this concept of a queue, right? And so it goes back to your concept of not selling, because it creates that scarcity. So if you were to call a lender and you were to say, hey, you're at the top of the queue, I've got a deal for you, are you ready? And then if they say, no, sorry, like I don't have the funds available or whatever, guess what? They go to the bottom of the queue and they're now getting the sense that, oh no, I'm missing out, and so it goes on to the next thing. So again, it just goes back to not having to sell. Like you have this scarcity mindset. Sorry, you missed the boat. That's on you. They're going to make sure that next time they've got those funds ready and available for when you do make that phone call. Hey, really quick, I need to interrupt the episode to talk about this week's sponsor, which of course is Lendr. Lendr is a hard and private money origination and servicing tool. So if you're currently using something like Excel to handle all of your business needs, it's about time that you upgrade to something a little bit more sophisticated like Lendr. Lendr helps you handle all of just the nitpicky, nuanced, tedious things that we have to do as lenders, like dealing with loan doc generation and preparation, or dealing with document storage, or collecting files from all of the borrowers and LLC docs, collecting monthly payments, and then at the end of the year having to deal with tax statements and generating 1099s and 1098s. It really is just a one-stop shop from start to finish. It helps you all the way from origination through servicing to payoff. It automatically generates payoff statements for you. You don't have to miss any extension fees or deal with prorated interest. It just, the whole system handles it for you. So if you're currently using something like Excel, I highly recommend that you upgrade to something a little bit more sophisticated, just to keep your borrowers all organized, just to keep your investors in the loop. And I highly recommend it. You can check that out by going to Join Lendr, Lendr.com, joinlendr.com, and check it out. And I know it's going to transform your business just like it has mine. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, it's really an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting mindset. I got a text 2 days ago from one of my private lenders, who then introduced me to his parents, and he's created for them a trust. And they started being one of my private lenders as well. And so 2 days ago, he told me that they now have an additional $180,000 that he would really like to get invested for them right away. About 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call from a different private lender, and they have $200,000 that they want to put to work. And so the interesting dynamic is, in this world of raising private money like this, there's no chasing, begging, persuading, selling, and all that. And guess what? The lenders are actually chasing you.
Right.
The lenders are chasing you because they know they can't get these rates of return, say, at the local bank.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I even have in the program a way where they can get their money back early before the term or the note comes due. If they have an emergency, I simply give everybody what's called a 90-day call option in the promissory note. And if they've got an emergency come up and they need their money back, then just give me a 90-day notice. I don't need 90 days. All I need is a week.
Sure.
But, the documentation says, give me a 90-day notice and I'll just replace your money with another private lender's money, and you can get your money back. But the thing of it is they don't want their money back.
Right.
I mean, they don't want their money back when I cash out on a house. I mean, a new private lender all the time, they'll say, hey, can't you just keep the money? Can't you just keep the money? The answer is no, I can't keep the money unless I've got a property to collateralize that note. Now, I'll do a lot of substitutions of collateral where like my minimum investment from my lenders is $50,000. Well, typically, I'm not going to buy a property for $50,000, right, but I can use it for rehab or renovation money. Mm-hmm. And so I'll do a lot of substitutions of collateral that I'll have my real estate attorney draw up. So if I'm cashing out on a house and I got another 1 or 2 or 3 in the wings, and I can keep that 50,000 without paying it off, I can use that money on another property and keep their promissory note open, active, and earning the money. But yeah, they don't want their money back. They want their money to keep earning money. I've only had 2 private lender notes called due early. Both of them were small, in fact, less than $50,000, and they were medical emergencies. So again, some people say, "Well, Jay, I'm a little scared to put a 90-day call option in the promissory note. What if I don't have another private lender?" Well, you should fix that. You should have another private lender. The most dangerous number in business is the number 1, right? 1 lender. That was my problem in 2009. Yep. 1 real estate attorney, 1 general contractor, et cetera. But anyway, hey, remember, it's your program. If you don't want to offer, remember, you're making the rules. If you don't want to offer a 90-day call option, you don't have to offer a 90-day call option.
Sure. No, absolutely. Have you ever gone down the road of setting up a fund rather than, swapping out investors or, as you call them, lenders? And, so we actually have a fund and we have really enjoyed that model. Mainly because it does get around some of the SEC regulations that you touched on. And also it's not kind of not necessarily a scramble, but there's a lot of moving pieces. It's got to swap out this guy and got to call this person and they're not available, so go to the next one. Whereas with the fund, you just have a pool of capital and you can kind of deploy it as you see fit. What are the pros and cons that you've seen and why you've stuck to this model as opposed to setting up a fund?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, a deed of trust gives somebody more security than a piece of paper, right? And if they're investing in a fund, then they've got an agreement. Maybe I got a percentage of equity on the back end. Maybe I'm just getting straight interest rate. But with my lenders, I feel really good about giving them a deed of trust or a mortgage. So that's it primarily for that reason. I've just stuck with this model. This model works great for single family houses. This model's not going to work for, larger projects, multifamily. Sure. Typically is not going to work for self-storage. Typically is not going to work for land, but it's a really, really good model. Now I've got friends that have set up funds for single family houses as well. But this model works really, really well when you're staying focused on single family houses.
I love it. The other thing that I was thinking as you were talking was also, I think there are a lot of people that say my market is too small, or I'm too rural, or I'm too whatever. But living in a town of 40,000 people is not a very large location, relatively speaking, to some of the places out there, right? And the fact that you've got 45 lenders and there's probably 500 more that you haven't even broached the topic with them, or like there's so many more out there than I think people realize is what I'm really getting at.
Well, you're right. There's way more money out there right now available than there are deals.
Sure.
I mean, prior to COVID, there was $18 trillion sitting in cash on the sidelines just here in the U.S.
Right.
And this side of COVID, there's over $31 trillion in cash.
Yep.
That people would love to find a way to do it. And so, I've had more money chasing me since COVID than before COVID.
Sure.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, for sure.
It is it's a lot better problem to have than you got a deal to fund and you ain't got no money.
Yep, absolutely. So, Jay, I want to be conscious of your time, so we won't go on too much longer here. But I do want to ask, if you were starting over now, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to the audience? Say, look, I wanna raise private capital. I don't really have anybody in my immediate network who I believe has a lot of funds, but I would like to start private lending or be a hard money lender and raise capital, but I just don't know what to do. What's kind of the biggest stepping stone? How do these people get started?
So if someone really does have a limited network, because we all know that there's a direct correlation between your network and your net worth.
Yep.
And one of the quickest ways that I know to grow your network overnight, and I mentioned it briefly at the start, is the organization called Business Networking International, BNI. It was founded by Ivan Meisner, I think back in the 1980s. And the way BNI works is different than a civic organization such as the Rotary Club. And the way BNI works is even little old Morehead City, North Carolina here had a BNI for quite a few number of years. And we had about 23 or 24 members in the local chapter. And the way it works is you all are in that local chapter to give each other leads as far as the type of people that you're looking to get in front of. And so you simply tell your fellow members, you get the opportunity once a week to stand up to remind people the type of people you're looking to get in front of and what type of product or service it is that you have to offer. And they truly only have one seat available per profession. One very coveted seat is the realtor. There's only one realtor in the group. There's only one attorney or real estate attorney. There's only one electrician, plumber, essential oil lady, CPA, etc. And so you all learn, and if you want to take the seat as the real estate investor, you're going to be the only person probably occupying that seat. And you share with your fellow members as your private lending program, right? That you have offer for people to earn high rates of return safely and securely. So they give you leads. And of course, you're giving your fellow members leads as to the type of business they're looking for. So I've raised millions of dollars by being active in BNI and get involved in your community as well. I mean, if you're not involved in your local church, the Rotary Club, those are longer term, relationships. You're not going to be going into those groups and, talking about what you do right off the bat, but you can with BNI because that's why you're in there. Secondly, here's a writer downer. Know your program. Know what it is that you're offering, right? And in fact, before we finish up the show, Bryce, I'll show a way to your audience that people can actually learn from start to finish what it is my program that I offer to potential investors and lenders, and how to go about it without ever asking anybody for money. I would like to share really quick, if we've got time, how I got my very first $500,000 in private money. So it was still in January 2009. I talked with my buddy Jeff Blankenship, and I learned about private money, and I put my program together. And here's how I got my first $500,000. Carol Joy and I were very involved in the local church, and to be specific, the Church of Christ on Barber Road in Morehead City, North Carolina. We've been members since 1988, before you were born, Bryce. But nonetheless, so we've been members there. And so I had my program. So this is on a Wednesday night at 7:30, January 2009. I walked into Bible study there at church, and I was looking for a gentleman named Wayne. Now, Wayne and I had known each other for a number of years. And here's exactly what I said to Wayne. Now, what did Wayne? I said, Wayne, I'd like to visit with you about something confidential after we finish Bible study. Are you going to have a few minutes? He said, sure. So we got together after Bible study. We went down into the nursery. I shut the door. And here's exactly what I said to Wayne. I said, Wayne, you know everybody in this town. And he did. Now, Bryce, I'm going to tell you what the man did. You're not going to have a clue what I'm talking about, so I'll explain it. But when I told Wayne, I said, Wayne, you know everybody in this town. Here's why. Wayne, for years, was the Zenith television dealer in Morehead City, North Carolina. Well, what in the world was that? Well, if you're too young to remember life before Walmart came to town, you went to the Zenith television dealer to buy your TV, and he financed your TV. And when it didn't work, he actually repaired the TV instead of you throwing it out in the trash and going and getting another brand new one for $299. So anyway, Wayne had put a TV in everybody's house in Morehead City and neighboring areas. I said, Wayne, you know everybody in this town. And here's the magic phrase. Here's the magic 3 words. I said, Wayne, I need your help. 4 words. I need your help. I said, you see, I've now opened up my real estate investing business by referral only, and I'm paying insane high rates of return to people that want to invest in my deals. Wayne, when you run across one of those hundreds of people that you know that's complaining about the stock market or complaining about the little bit of money that they can get in the local bank, CD, would you refer them to me? Notice I'm not asking Wayne for any money. I'm asking for his help to spread the word. What do you think Wayne said to me? He said, well, now, Brother Jay, what you got going on there? And I said, well, what do you mean, Wayne? And he said, well, what kind of insane high rates are you paying? And I said, well, are you saying that you and your wife might be interested? He said, well, we might be. I don't know. I said, well, what kind of high rate? I mean, what kind of rate sounds, high to you? He says, well, we're earning about 3% in the local bank, that's what it was in 2009. He said, I don't know. I guess maybe high would be 5 or 6%. I said, Wayne, I can't pay you 5 or 6%, but I can pay you 8%. He said, put me down for $250,000. So the next day, I went to his and his wife's home here in Morehead City, and I explained the whole program. Had my teacher hat on. Not only the interest rate, but how you're protected, how you can get your money back, the length of the note, the frequency of payments. And by the way, I leave that up to the lender because they have different objectives. So after visiting with them at their home the next afternoon over 2 cups of coffee, that $250,000 became $500,000. And I told them I'll put your money to work just as soon as I can. And I did. I still had those 2 houses under contract that I wasn't saying a word about.
Right.
Because remember, desperation's got a smell to it. So we're separating the conversations of the program and then having a deal or deals for them to fund.
I love it. That's a good story. And you just kept on doing it and kept on keeping on, and it's
and by the way, Wayne and his wife actually did end up referring a lot of private lenders to us after they became a private lender themselves.
I love it. Jay, my goodness, you are a wealth of information. This has been great. Really, really good. For anyone listening in my audience who would like to reach out to you, pick your brain, learn about raising capital, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, I'll give a couple of ways. So I just finished recently recording my Private Money Challenge. Well, what in the world is the Private Money Challenge? So the Private Money Challenge is a series of 7 videos, and they're only 15 to 20 minutes long, and it really does a deep dive into all the foundational ways that I go about private money. So I'd love to invite your audience, Bryce, into my Private Money Challenge, and they can go to www.privatemoneychallenge.com. Easy enough. www.privatemoneychallenge.com. You'll immediately receive your first video. And the next 6 days at 9 a.m. in the morning, you'll get the subsequent 6. You're going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to be right there on the video engaging with you. And so that's one way, privatemoneychallenge.com. Another way, in addition to that, is my book, Where to Get the Money Now. I'll be glad to autograph it. It says Where to Get the Money Now, how and where to get money for your real estate deals without relying on traditional or institutional lenders. I'll autograph it, and I'll send it 3-day priority in the mail to you. You can pick that up. The book's free, just covers shipping and handling. Don't pay $20 on Amazon. You can get my book at Jay Conner. By the way, I'm an ER, not an OR. So you can get my book at jayconner.com, JAYCONNER.com/book. jayconner.com/book. And then finally, if anybody's listening and you just can't wait to get on the fast track, I've got an upcoming live event. It's called the Private Money Conference. right around the corner. And you can check that out at www.theprivatemoneyconference.com. Theprivatemoneyconference.com. So there's 3 ways. Oh, here's a 4th way. If you're listening and you like podcasts, well, check out my podcast. I'm on all the major platforms, got over 800 episodes. And the name of my podcast is Raising Private Money. Easy to find.
I love it. I mean, I don't think you could name any of those any more simply. That's make it easy to find. I love it. Jay, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been great. I've learned a ton. Definitely going to implement a couple of these things into the way that I structure and raise capital, and it's been great. So really, really appreciate your time.
Bryce,
for anybody else
so much for having me.
For anyone else who's still listening, absolutely check out Jay's book, his podcast, websites, all the above. And until next week, we will catch you on the Lendr podcast. Thanks for listening.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jconner.com/moneyguide. That's jconner.com/moneyguide and download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jconner.com/moneyguide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.